The meeting of the Western New York Environmental Alliance Congress 2023 is called to order. Thank you all for being here today. We have not met as a Congress since January of 2022, so that's about a year and a half ago. We did have kind of a couple of false starts this spring when we thought we were going to convene the 2023 Congress, but that did not happen for various reasons. We actually also thought we were going to start it in September of this year, but that didn't happen. So here we are on October 5th of 2023, and we're gathered here at Tifft thanks to the Tifft team for making this space available for us. Again, my name is John Whitney. I am the chair. Let's just say even the reluctant chair. But we're trying to cover that role as best we can. We have no secretary right now. However, this meeting is being recorded. This is an official announcement that this meeting is being recorded. I'll announce it again if you need another reminder, but it is being recorded by that device right next to Kelly. So it may very well turn from time to time in your direction. If that is extraordinarily uncomfortable for you, give us some notice of that. Otherwise, you may appear in the eventual posting of the meeting recording. If we're not taking formal minutes for this meeting, that will serve as our minutes. So speaking of minutes, it's very traditional for organizations to ask those in attendance to approve the minutes of the last meeting, those being from January of 2022. That to me seems silly. Although we could ask for a motion to approve the minutes, were we able to locate them? To me, it seems more efficient to acknowledge that those minutes are, in fact, posted on the Western New York Environmental Alliance's webpage. You can go see them. They're a verbatim recording of exactly what happened at that meeting for the full couple hours. So it's not like somebody summarized the notes for that meeting and is asking you to agree that they're accurate. They are the recording of the meeting. So with those being publicly available on the webpage and also on the Western New York Environmental Alliance Facebook page, which I'm sure you're all connected to and check at least once a week, or not. Either way, they're posted there. So it'd be my recommendation that a motion come from the floor, from any authorized voting member of the organization, that we acknowledge that the recording of the last meeting is posted publicly and available and represents the true and accurate recording of said meeting, and let that be our meeting acknowledgement. So with someone making that motion with a so moved signal, Nick always waits for the second. So Margaret is actually making the motion, and Nick got the second in. So unless there's discussion, I'll ask for a signifying of all in favor. Anyone opposed to that strategy? Okay, thank you. It probably took longer to do that than to go through the process of digging out the minutes and asking you to review them, and you would have not read them anyway, but they're all there. So thank you for that. Let me wake the computer up again, and our treasurer, who's Brenda Young, treasurer's job for the Western New York Environmental Alliance is another one of those jobs that we have a hard time filling, but Brenda took it on, and thank you to her for doing that. However, she couldn't be here today. She actually is extraordinarily busy all through October, she said, so once we moved out of September, we lost Brenda's ability to be here. But she shared with us the treasurer's report, and this is not going to be in the form of a statement of financial activity and a statement of financial position. It's going to be two numbers, and those numbers, when they open, will show you that, in fact, the organization remains solvent. I just have to get it to appear for you. Well, I won't even get it to appear for you. I'll read them to you. The current balance in the Western New York Environmental Alliance's account is $10,702.96. So that's not a bad number for a small organization. Expenditures January 22, which was the last time we had this presentation, to date have been $5,002.96. And we've had donations since that same January date of $6,364.20. So that represents Brenda's Treasurer's Report, which I share for you. If there are no questions about that, well, are there any questions about that? Hearing none, and in the interest of keeping things moving along, I would entertain a motion to accept the Treasurer's Report from Jay. And Nick got his second in. And all in favor say aye. Aye. So the Treasurer's Report is accepted. The purpose of today's session is to talk a little bit about what's been going on with the organization, what the future of the organization might be, what your roles in the organization might be. But we're going to kick that off with kind of a keynote presentation by one of our new board member candidates. And I thought we'd do that before we actually go through board elections, just to kind of set the stage for some of the things we're talking about. We'll come back to board member elections after that. But Phil, let's bring you up, let you do your talk, and that will get us thinking a little bit, and then we'll go from there. Come back around to some election materials.
Oh, same words. So. Everyone. Just let me get my little timer out so I don't go wildly over here. Alright, well thank you all for having me here to do this talk. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here. So today I want to talk a little bit. Linda, is this okay? Better? Alright, I'll stick my kisser right up to it, thanks. So I want to talk today a bit about climate change and coastal resilience in the area, taking into account some of the historical ecologies of the area, because I think the way that we think about and understand both these historical ecologies and coastal resilience has a lot to do with the way that we imagine our coast heading into the next couple of crazy decades here. So my title is New Hydrological Regime, Historical and Future Ecologies of Buffalo's Waterfront. I want to give a special thanks to Margaret, Linda, and Jay, who welcomed me back here right into the fold as soon as I sort of started in on my PhD fieldwork. Margaret and Linda were special sort of mentors in me in the process in particular, and all three of their works will, if you're sort of keyed into it, you'll see it all come up here in the top. So which epigraph will come to pass, right? So now it's all obliterated, of course. The first time I met Margaret and Jay, they had this funny little tension. Margaret said, my position is that we're effed, you know? And Jay is like, no, there's hope to be had. So, is it going to be we're all obliterated, of course? Oh, it has all been obliterated, of course, and it has been. So now that it has been, what is the next step? In part, that's part of the talk. That's part of the sort of essence of the talk I'm trying. It has been. These ecologies have been obliterated. So now that that's the case, what's the next step? But also, I have this like hopeful revolutionary slogan from May '68, right? Dessus les pavés, la plage, beneath the pavement, the beach, which I love. Okay. So I'm a human geographer, an urban political ecologist, so my training is not in the natural sciences exactly. I kind of weave together science studies, landscape analysis, some very sort of humanistic concerns, as well as stuff on climate and politics, political economy. I'll hold off on giving a kind of read of this old Buffalo Centennial poster, because I'm afraid I won't get through my talk. But we could get back to it. So, point number one is that a lot of this talk is going to be about lake level change in the lakes. It's kind of one of these things that I think it gets underrepresented when we're talking about climate change because of its mundaneness, because of its everydayness. But I think when we're especially thinking about coastal resilience, it's of fundamental importance to consider. So basically, climate change is causing a kind of exacerbation in lake level fluctuation. Sounds kind of boring, actually, in some ways, but I'm hoping to create some interest and excitement about it. So basically, let me read this. Climate change has shifted the Great Lakes into a new hydrological regime. There's, among other things, exacerbating water level fluctuations across the Great Lakes Basin. I'll talk a little bit about the reasons for that. But I want to talk a little bit about just lake level fluctuation in general. So here's this kind of, if you've ever studied these lake level fluctuations, this is the Army Corps graph that always comes up. Actually, we have really good records for lake level fluctuation dating back to the 1860s. The point that I really want to emphasize here is that we've had record lows and record highs in the last decade. Okay, so there's all sorts of good work done on this. Actually, in Lake Erie, the record lows happened in the 30s. You can see, I can't really get off, I don't have a pointer, but you can see in the 30s there's quite a dip in Lake Erie that corresponds to the Dust Bowl and to the dip in the certain weather patterns coming out of the Gulf. It doesn't matter. So we were sort of spared in Lake Erie the record lows, but you can see toward the end of the graph here, 2019, there were record highs more or less across the entire basin. And if you look in the Lake Erie line, there are a couple of peaks. There's a peak in the mid-70s, in the mid-80s, and again in the 90s. So there are these sort of decadal shifts, and actually the politics of these highs are really interesting. Every time there's a record high, the IJC does some big study on what they can do to monitor the highs. I was looking at these reports from the 80s where they were talking about putting a huge dam across the Niagara River in order to moderate the levels of Lake Erie and all this kind of stuff. So there's a long history of lake level stabilization across the basin. And I'll just say a word or two about why this is changing. Essentially, there are sort of new teleconnections, new weather patterns that are emerging with regards to climate change, of course, and some of the big effects that we're seeing have to do with whether or not ice forms on the lake and how ice forms on the lake. So actually, now that the destabilization of the polar vortex has become a more prominent force in our sort of annual weather patterns, the lake can essentially flash freeze. And this flash freezing of the lake shuts down the evaporation process. And the evaporation process is really how the lake loses most of its water. We lose water mostly by evaporation. And so when the ice does not form, when we don't get this freezing function, there's evaporation throughout the entire course of the winter, and lakes tend to lower. So essentially, ice is the sort of difference that makes the difference when we're talking about lake level fluctuation. So, okay, lake levels are fluctuating a little bit, or a lot of it, historically. What's the point? So, I want to sort of emphasize that this fluctuation is, or has, or should have a lot to do with how we think about coastal resilience. Hopefully, some of you, or I'm sure many of you, are familiar with this bit of a fact right here, right? But the continental U.S. coastlines, if you add up the Pacific, Atlantic, and Gulf Coast, total about 5,100 miles. The Great Lakes coastline, U.S. and Canada, combined are double that. So there's an incredible amount of coastline in the Great Lakes. And in fact, when we're talking about coastal resilience, it's quite a bit more complicated than the monotonic sea level rise that we see happening on the oceanic coast, right? So it's not just that sea levels are rising here, that water levels are rising, but that waters are rising and then falling. And actually, this has high waters create a much different set of social, cultural, political, and economic problems than do low waters, right? High waters, of course, tend to create floods, and a lot of the coastal resilience studies that we're seeing in the area now are really kind of more concerned about floods, it seems, than anything. But low waters also have important ramifications for not only for shipping, but for recreation, for water quality, for concentration of contaminants and things like this. Okay, point three. This is where it starts to get interesting to me. You know, lake level fluctuation is tightly tied historically to wetland creation in the Great Lakes. Let's just keep it to the Great Lakes in particular. But lake level wetlands are essentially the biological expression of lake level fluctuation. Okay, lake level fluctuation is the sort of physical process that wetland expansion and contraction respond to. So, in fact, what I'm marking out in some of my work here is that these lake level fluctuations call us to the history of wetland loss in our area and sort of force us to view it anew with regards to human impact in the region. So I'll just read you one or two fundamental points about this. This is from Janet Plank. Two fundamental findings she talks about in her article. Water level fluctuations are integral components of the Great Lakes ecosystem. Two, lake level variations over time and space have been a driving force in the creation, adaptation, and evolution of both life and land forms in the Great Lakes wetlands. In other words, fluctuations are not external to the wetland ecosystem, but necessary to the maintenance of its productivity, diversity, and extent. So we have these changing water level fluctuations, but the effort should not be to stabilize them, right? The effort should not be to sort of to compress them as, like the compensating works in Sault Ste. Marie and the Moses Saunders Dam on Lake Ontario tend to do. This is from an IJC report. You'll see that this article is from '93, this report's from '89. This is all in response to the high lake level, the record high lake levels in the mid-'80s. There's this whole a number of reports that came out that were so very concerned with the high lake levels and what should we do to protect coastal infrastructure. Although it wasn't called coastal resilience then, right? The word resilience hadn't quite come in the vote. Anyway, this IJC report statement says, water level fluctuations are integral to the Great Lakes St. Lawrence environment, not an outside force imposed on it. Fluctuations are especially important to coastal wetlands, the most productive and diverse component of this ecosystem. So I became super fascinated with the historical wetland loss in the area, and I really did everything I could to try to map that loss and document the history of that loss. Unfortunately, the records are terrible. Most of the loss happened before there's any sort of proper study mapping it or anything. So there's one okay map that we get again in the mid-90s. This is a USGS map. This is of the entire Lake Erie, and you can see compared to what was going on the other side of the basin, our loss is minuscule. On the other side of the basin, we have the Great Black Swamp, and really the Great Black Swamp conjoins right up north into Ontario past what is now Detroit. RN looks something a little bit more like this. So relative to the other part of the basin, our loss may not appear extensive, but this entire coastline was, we don't have to talk about all the linology to it, but I'd be happy to in questions. But we don't have to get into the reasons why there were fewer wetlands and all this, but nevertheless, our entire coast were essentially a dune wetland complex. And I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of that dune wetland complex to the pre-settler ecology. Dune systems are themselves wonderfully complex. Okay, silt comes down the river, the waves blow that silt back up on the shore, which dry out in the sun, the wind blows that now sand into these hills, and that hill, the sort of mounds of sand become established by plants, especially adapted to that environment. So the plant and the dune grow as Henry Chandler calls the famous dune ecologist, right? Says Karipusi, they grow step in step. So the bigger the plants, the taller the dunes. This is from Bennett Beach, this picture here. Just to give a sense of what the dune wetland, so behind the dune then there'd be a barrier wetland, right? So that's what most of this would have been here, going all the way essentially back to South Park, to Lackawanna, and up to about the entrance to the Niagara River there. So I visited this dune wetland system in Prince Edward County in Lake Ontario. Here are a couple pictures just to stoke your imagination of what something like this looks like or could look like. I think it's important to have some kind of image in the imaginary when we're imagining these pre-settled landscapes. And the Tifft Mountains here, so we would have had mountains right here outside the window. So the Tifft Mountains are a great dune simulacrum, right? It's a case, because I talked to the steward of Tifft, and he said that occasionally someone will come along and say, oh, why don't we just put a bunch of sand over the mounds and call it dune? Of course, that's not how they function, right? It's not any part of this sort of complex set of systems that create and maintain the dynamics of the dune. So this loss of dune wetland systems in the Great Lakes, I want to say, are not a case of human disturbance, right? It's not a natural, it's not you talk about human disturbance in the framework of an ecological disturbance, right? So I want to say that human disturbance of this sort is not ecological disturbance, it's much more political than that. So it's a case of settler capitalist destruction, which will have implications for how we think about coastal resilience. So I don't need to, we've all seen these photos of the physical transformations of Buffalo's waterfront, and I would love to speak more on this, but this is very much, Margaret has put my attention on the physical integrity of these coastal landscapes and how much they've been transformed. When we talk about restoration and physical integrity of these coastal waterways, it's not just about toxic loading and it's not even about wildlife habitat, right? There's so much about the actual physical integrity of the coastline that contributes to the ecological process. So yeah, so compared to the dune photos, hopefully these are stark. I also do want to suggest that this is not unique to Buffalo, of course. Every major city in the Great Lakes, and most of the minor ones too, are built at where rivers meet the lakes. And this is a map based on the vision of Cadwallader Colin, who even as far back as the 18th century saw the state transformed essentially into a commercial infrastructure. Okay, I don't want to go too far into it, but what's unique about this map is not just the Erie Canal across, but it shows all of the smaller kind of linking canals to other major waterways. And what you end up understanding is that New York State, as the Empire State, is imagined as a nexus or connection into the Mississippi Basin, through the Genesee Canal, all the way to the Mid-Atlantic, through the Susquehanna Canal, up into the North Atlantic, through the St. Lawrence Canal, right? So the entire landscape is transformed into a commercial infrastructure. So I want to sort of ask different kinds of questions about about coastal resilience. We sort of take it a bit as a given what that means in some cases, I think, or we just say, yes, settler sorry, we just say coastal resilience is good, and I want to be able to put a finer point on what it is we mean by it. I think we really need to be more exacting when we speak of resilience and acknowledge the fact that when we speak of resilience, it often also obscures as much as it illuminates. So I've given other talks on Times Beach, which I think actually is a great model of resilience on our waterfront here in response to, it looks like hell, right? But it responded exactly as it should have to the storms in 2019, to the storms last winter, the bomb cyclone. It looks like a wreck, and also it has given way to lush spring and summer growth, and it will continue to do so. All right, so just let me say a few things wrapping up about coastal resilience. Coastal resilience is not just urban resilience or community resilience. It's not exactly ecological resilience either, right? We're never going to go back to those dune wetland systems. But of course, ECHDC's vision, for instance, of a coastally resilient system is one that secures those settler capital industrial infrastructures that it can then reuse for its real estate development projects. Of course, that's not I don't think that hasn't been in our group that are participating. That's certainly not been our vision of coastal resilience. Of course, the city has its own interest in protecting infrastructure, especially water infrastructure, and resilience becomes a really key part to that, but we really have to be specific about what we mean by it when we talk about it. So we have to ask resilience for whom or for what. I do want to point out, just it's so central to my work that, yeah, you know, as a form of disturbance ecology, resilience does obscure these other longer histories of destruction. I think we view it, if we view these histories only as ecological histories, we miss out on the fact that they're deeply political ones that we are continuing to shape today, right? So I want to keep in mind that we define what needs to be resilient, and that's not an ecological point, that's a political point. And so we have to not view ourselves as, I mean, we are ecological agents also, but also as political agents, and that's a different force, in fact. So, yeah, I just want to leave on this point. This is back at the Marilla landfill here. There's some wetlands you can kind of see up off into the corner. Maybe this is my partner standing in the field of the train coming through. And you know, when I think about resilience, I'm also trying to think about the sort of very human scale of it in the way that people and communities interact in and across these landscapes. And maybe the most moving thing I've read on it is from Linda. She's writing about the Buffalo River, so I'll just read this in parting. There's a wildness in the Buffalo River and its messy shoreline. This is a wildness that attracts and repels because it is a reflection of those parts of human culture that we repress and seek to eliminate. But we need spaces for illicit and unsanctioned activities. Many people need to break out of socially accepted norms, especially young people and those in the margins of legitimate society. The spaces of disorder not only permit a kind of retreat, recklessness, and abuse, they sanctify it in their own state of wildness. The Buffalo River is generous and permissive. Its unruliness is an important condition for human life. So I want to sort of, when we're thinking about the tremendous complexity of resilience, not to lose this deep cultural, psychosocial quality to it. Yeah, thank you.
We'll have some opportunity for dialogue throughout the rest of the time together, but I think it's good, while it's fresh, to go ahead and ask a few questions of Phil, if you want to right now. But again, he set the stage for the rest of our conversation as well, so it could come up later if it's not coming to you right this moment. But does anybody have anything they want to ask? Yes, go right ahead. Make sure you use your really loud voice, if not even come up to the mic. Yeah. You're loud.
Could you distinguish for me again the difference between like a dune wetland versus a barrier wetland?
So distinguishing wetland systems itself is a whole politics and a whole science. Not exactly a pseudoscience, but it's a very contested science. Usually when we talk about wetlands in the Great Lakes, we have riparian wetlands, coastal wetlands, and barrier wetlands. The riparian wetlands just being those that are along the river, which we would have had along the Buffalo River here. The coastal wetlands being those that are essentially simultaneous to the water of the open lake, and the barrier wetland being that which emerges behind a dune, right? The water that can't essentially get out to the lake. These distinctions are important and would have always been changing, right? Based on the conditions of the season and based on what's happening on the lake and what's happening on the river. The point is that these systems are incredibly dynamic, and what would have qualified as one wetland would quickly have become another if there was a flood, if there was a big sage. The old reports of the river were that you could essentially skip across it in August and September, and then when the floods came in the fall or in the spring, right, they would charge a new course through the dune over here, so that even the course of the river, the outlet of the river would have always been shifting, and with that, what becomes a barrier wetland and what becomes a coastal wetland would have shifted also, right? So if you think about the three main types, but always shifting based on local conditions, that's, sort of the geomorphological way that they talk about wetlands in the literature of the Great Lakes. If you look into wetland taxonomy, it's crazy. It's these taxonomic charts of exactly what kind of wetland it is, and if it's wetland, when it's not. There's a huge amount of politics to it, especially after Bush's wetland loss policy emerged at things. So you have to mitigate wetland loss and things. Is that helpful?
I know Jane had one.
Phil, I really like your work. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for presenting it today. Some neat parts that I was thinking about was when you talk about the levels of the lake, and you went to the fact that the planning for flooding as opposed to that's so important, and thank you for making that Bitcoin attention. So, this is a big question. I know you probably can't answer, but what's next? Are we going up? Are we going down? People talk about how low being one of the best places during climate change, in climate change. We don't even think about our shorelines. So, do you have anything to say about what's next?
One of my favorite quotes that I quote like this is from this guy who's a climatologist at the University of Michigan with NASA, and someone asked him, "So are the water levels going up or down?" And he said, "Yes." So as far as the water levels go, the point with regards to climate change is that we will see increasing highs and decreasing lows, and I just think of course it cues us into the complexity of the infrastructure that would have to be developed in order to account for that. And also, part of the point of the talk is that the infrastructure was always already there, right? The ideal infrastructure are precisely these dune wetland systems. They would be the ideal infrastructure for mitigating the impacts of these higher and lower waters. But of course, those are not coming back, so what kind of infrastructure might be relevant for us? I'm not really here to say. I wish that we could take it all down, fill in the area up to the Great Wall with wetlands, and call it a day. But I don't think that's in the cards. I'm not sure.
That's the right answer.
Another question or two for Phil? Yes.
I just wondered if you had any thoughts or opinions on proposed plans for Ralph Park and the coastal area, and if they plan to rebuild there, and what your thoughts are, given the context of your talk.
I think that it's nice and it's tokenistic. you know, in relative to the history of the place, it's tokenistic, and also it's what can get done. And I don't want to poo-poo it, but I also don't want to announce it as a coastal resilience solution. Like another proposal has been to essentially close off the Michigan Pier, right, and make that into a wetland and breeding ground. That was a kind of ECHDC plan, and at the time Renelli was the executive director and came out and said, oh, well, this will help to bring coastal resilience into the Lake Erie coastline. It's a tokenistic kind of suggestion of what the coast would have been or what it maybe could be, but it's not actually responding to the actual fluctuation. It's not responding to what's actually happening as far as climate change goes, as far as increasing sesh activity, things like this. Is that clear?
Yeah, I guess I just wondered because it was a huge cost to that immediate environment. They cut everything down like in one day.
Yeah.
The rebuilding of that small section for a really long time.
And of course, I mean, if you look around, the entire coastline is hardscaped, right? So, maybe creating a softer edge on a couple hundred feet of park. I'm not sure it's going to, what kind of impact that will make. I think it's possible that it kind of triggers the imaginary people who go there to notice how much is actually hardscaped. Maybe not that would positive outcome. That's the optimistic answer, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just reminded of work that Harry Royer, you might know Harry, a law professor. He did some work on what he calls submerged lands, where the ownership along waterfronts, sometimes it ends at high water mark, sometimes it goes out into water, and it's very confusing depending upon what time or and the proposal was that the state set a place at where the high water mark is supposed to have it being punctuated, and that all of the land that is currently at a high level in the water then becomes public land, and as the water retreats, then you start to be able to build up wetlands because you wouldn't have the private property issue associated with it. I know that nothing came of it, but it always struck me that something like that might be the beginning of a partial way of trying to address, at least in low water, when you know the toxicity increases because not getting any filtration in a smaller volume of water, that something like that might be good.
I mean, I think if cities and towns were willing to go that route, I think that the investment is more maintaining hardscape infrastructure for real estate investment. So I think if towns are willing to go that route, it would be interesting. But of course, our coastlines, especially in the Great Lakes, especially here in Buffalo, have never been public. They've never really been for the public. So I think the part of our work is really to emphasize the importance in making those coastlines public, not just so that we can visit them, right, but so that they serve this public good, so that,
Again, we'll have an opportunity to visit with Phil and the entire group through the rest of our time together. One last one, or do we move on?
Well, I just want to...
Margaret does, but in a louder voice. So
I actually just want to give you an applause because that was really great, and the last thing you said was really great. So, I don't know, thank you.
Yeah.
I thought it would be good to start out our conversation with that. Kind of set the stage, set us thinking, and now we can do some business stuff. Although I hope it leads to some more dialogue as well. Let me see if I can escape from this screen. And with the business session convened, I thought that we would start out with a quick around the room introduction of who you are,
who you represent, and if you are one of the candidates for the Western New York Environmental Alliance Board of Directors, either a new director or a renewing candidate, let the group know that at the same time. So, I ironically introduced myself. I'm John McNee. I am the chair. I work part-time for Cornell Cooperative Extension after about 40 years working for the Soil Conservation Service that later on became the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Did a lot of that wetland drainage work on farms, especially over the years, and then in the latter 2/3 of my career, a lot of wetland restoration work, because that was something that was recognized as valuable to be done in restoring some land. So I won't go into more details about that now. I am one of the renewing directors up for election today.
Hi, I'm Jay Murray. I've been on the Western Environmental Alliance Board of Directors for a long time, at least 10 years. And I'm also the executive director of the Pollinator Conservation Association. We do a lot of restoration work, a lot of advocacy. Help form the Our Coalition. We'll talk about a little bit about our work out there as we go through the meeting. Birds and Niagara is a project of mine. It's an annual winter bird festival. It's the only one in North America in winter. It's international. And I'm a friend of Times Beach also. I'm one of the founders there. So I'm also the advocacy chair of this group. So thank you all for being here. I'm not up for re-election, but I'm on the board. There will be some days. Thanks.
Probably next year.
I'm going to try to use the mic as much as we can, just because I go over there, we're fairly close.
Hi, my name is Linda Sheekoff, and I am one of the people running for the board. I am pleased to be on the Western New York Environmental Alliance board. As a faculty member at UB in the Department of Architecture and Planning, I participated and helped form it many, many years ago with the Community Foundation. And I always think about it as a kind of an organization that if we didn't have it, that we would need to actually figure out how to make it again. So hopefully we can keep going with this. I'm also with the Native Plants Conservancy, or the Native Plants Collaborative, it's called. We're working to try to get more native trees planted in the city and the county so that we can contribute to the food system. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Robinson. I'm going to use my outdoor voice on this. I'm a long-time, if you will, sort of citizen activist, and Phil set a paradigm that I think is normally not considered, and that is both the political, historical, ecological evolution, and those things that exist on so many different planes. And so I put into that, where as a political, actually my environmental interest after 1972 when the Earth Day, that continued. But as a historical preservation advocate. And so my focus has been more or less over the last 10 or 15 years is that sort of built environment interface with what remains of quote unquote natural environment and the interplay between those. And that is a very interesting dynamic brought into a ecological, evolutionary kind of perspective. That's kind of where I'm a candidate for the Western New York Environmental Alliance, and would be bringing sort of that perspective and as an advocate very strongly with all these folks with the outer harbor and the transition and the struggle continues. It ain't done deal. You know, I mean, they built the damn amphitheater, but there's still a lot down the pipe involved in that. So with that, and currently, those interests have really sort of crystallized in my advocacy for restoring the parkway. Humboldt Parkway and an extension essentially from like the AKG to where the Elmo is. And environmental and historical and political struggles involved with that.
Terry has a great outdoor voice that worked best in here, but we can move this around. You want to use the mic as much as you can.
Okay, I could find that. I worked with Oregon here for 4 years in 3 weeks, and then in 1990 I retired, and I became active here in Moscow in the Sierra Concrete Positions Station. I have a great leader in the my bag was introducing a lot of environmental people to the structure of the government, which is very important to understand. A lot of people think if we push this button over here, that button over there to our home. It doesn't really quite work that way. You have to learn the structure, you have to study it, you have to know the people who really make it happen, and the people who will listen to nothing. So right now, I'm studying climate change pretty much, especially in the Adirondacks, and I'm very concerned because I think measuring weather from the past is no more. Even measuring waterways from the past is no more. We're into a brand new world here that's going to entail brand new science of understanding and revision to current sciences. So I have to stay alert and learn. There's a lot to learn. And I'm 88 years old. I'm still learning. And get out and enjoy it.
Hi everyone, my name is Marcus Robson, and I'm here representing the Western New York Land Conservancy. I just recently started a role as the director of the Western New York Land Conservancy.
My name is Marilyn Firestein, and I'm here representing the Buffalo Ecological Society. We just sort of reactivated our conservation committee, honestly, during conservation deregulating and stuff.
Hi, I'm Nick Henshin. I'm a teaching associate professor of ecology at the University of Buffalo, and my specialization is restoration of soils and especially earthworks.
Hi, I'm Margaret Wooster. I know most of you in the room. I've been around for a long time. I was founding member of the Friends of the Buffalo River, which became Buffalo Niagara Water Keeper. I was executive director. I had a lot of I was as Great Action United, and I'm now on board of Western Environmental Alliance. I'm really interested. I also work with the Outer Harbor Coalition, and I'm really interested in everything we just talked about with restoring and resilience on the Outer Harbor, but I also work with the allies of the Tonawanda Second Nation on the Alabama Swamp controversy, which some of you may know about. And that's a very important wetland. They call it the Sixth Great Lake, this big body of water that's underground, and it's Alabama Swamp, and it's being developed as an industrial campus. And so the Tonawanda Second Nation, it also borders on Maryland, so they have a lot of allies. And I'm very proud to be part of the Western New York Environmental Alliance, because Western New York does extend that far east to the Genesee River, I think. And so that's very much part of our, what we're also looking at. In internal water and as well as coastal water.
Hi again, so I am a candidate for the board of the Western New York Environmental Alliance, and I'm not sure, I just did my PhD, just finished it from UC Berkeley, but I've been working here with our over the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation and keynote address. That really did set the stage. I did want to mention, if you didn't do a sign-in, please do that before you leave today, just so we have a record of being able to attach your name to the faces that are appearing on this video, which is not mine or one of I'm saying over here, but it's going to be Kelly's. Oh, Kelly, by the way, is also taking notes as the interim secretary. Thank you, Kelly, for doing that.
Hi, folks. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly St. John. I am the Climate Action Manager with the City of Buffalo. It's a relatively new role, but not new doors necessarily. So I fill and act as the COC on the board of the Western Environmental Alliance on behalf of the City of Buffalo. And as John mentioned, I am the interim secretary for right now.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anne Colley, and I'm really good one. I don't belong to any organization, but during COVID, I rediscovered how necessary places like the Outer Harbor are, and places like Alabama Swamp. And since then, I've tried to be active in helping to defend the Outer Harbor from capitalism and nutrition.
Hi, I'm Anna Pajera. I am the candidate for the Board of Directors for the Western New York Environmental Alliance, and I am here representing the Great Lakes Ocean Network as a member. I'm also the treasurer for the Birds on Niagara, and I'm an active volunteer ambassador for Buffalo Niagara Waterkeepers, and also on the stewardship committee of the Western New York Grassroots Gardens. My background is primarily in communications and community engagement, so that's really where my passion lies. It's more the outreach component and education for community members.
Hi, my name is Janet Lenachek. I'm chair of the Sierra Club Niagara Group, and my co-chair Sarah sitting right next to me. What's that? Oh, okay. She just demoted herself. Anyway, I'm a reluctant chair. I understand that. I was first involved in the environment in my youth. I studied zoology. I ended up in aquatic and marine biology for 4 or 5 years. Left that field due to lack of work, believe it or not, and ended up in healthcare and sales. And once I retired to my roots, and my love for the environment and Sierra Club caught my attention. Our biggest push is doing things about climate change right now, but of course we care about all things environmental.
Hi, I'm also a climate activist with Sierra Club, but I'm here representing the Integrated Climate Justice Community of Western New York. I also serve with United Solar Energy Supporters in New York. We'll put board together and serve as a member of the Clean Energy Community of the Town Members. And we're working for the Integrated Climate Justice Community at this moment. We're holding a press conference tomorrow night with Bell at noon at LaSalle Park in Porter Avenue, and we're fighting for the Climate Change Superfund Act. So let's make the big oil companies pay on the tax of the ratepayers.
Hi everyone, my name is Zeke Wong. I'm the community Buffalo also Conservancy. Looking forward to it. Hello, my name is Jen Lawrence, also from the Buffalo Homestead Parks Conservancy. I'm the coordinator, so I sell tree benches and pavers on the parks. So this is a really fun thing for me to get more environmentally engaged. Spend first time here, so thank you for letting me here.
Hi, I'm Ellen Dixon. I've been involved with the Outer Harbor and other organizations, the EPK, and to some extent Sierra, over the years. But right now I'm actually, for this meeting anyway, representing the League of Women Voters of Buffalo Niagara, which has a kind of southern waterfront committee. We would hope to be, once this group
one again, maybe we can get to a meeting and energize some of our members who have come forth in past battles with respect to the outer art and have had great activity with forming some of the meetings that we had and public outreach and so forth. But right now, folks are kind of recovering from COVID, and in some cases, people are too ill to participate anymore. So it's getting to be kind of an age-out problem. So if we know any young women who are politically inclined, tell them to consider the League of the Voters, because as we are all seeing, our vote is under attack, and the League is your place to go for some help along those lines.
Sarah Kernsky. I am the development director at the Massachusetts Avenue Project, which is a urban farm program, nonprofit. We call ourselves a food hub, and we're located on Massachusetts Avenue on the west side. And I've been with them for about 3 years, and I do our donations, fundraising, partnership management, and communications.
Hi everyone, my name is Sylvan Ashbrook. I'm here representing Grassroots Gardens of Western New York. I'm also involved in the Pollinator Conservation Association as a board member. We at Grassroots Gardens of Western New York have green space that we help maintain with the community in both the cities of Buffalo and Niagara Falls. And recently we just approved as a subcontractor for a NOAA grant that the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeepers has been working on in collaboration with the restoration of the Screwdriver Creek. So very, very excited to be doing that kind of work. And I'm also involved in the Western New York Native Plant Collaborative too. So excited to be here.
Well, thanks everybody. I think Jay may come over and scoop up the microphone while I realign the video here. And while I'm doing that, maybe someone from the floor could propose that the interim secretary cast a unanimous ballot for the board candidates. But before I do that, I'll mention that Steve Peraza, that's Dr. Steve Peraza, whose face is not there yet, who's not here in person. That's not Steve's fault. Steve volunteered to fill a slot that Andrea Sullivan has been playing. Andrea is the executive director of the Partnership for Public Good. Many of you know her, know her voice, know her work as well. Andrea lives in East Aurora, as do I. They have a young child in their household. She's trying to hold that job down. She was just getting overwhelmed. But she found Steve willing to take that slot, which we think is really great. So there'll be more information about Steve on our webpage, and you'll get to see his image on the webpage, probably on our Facebook page as well. But we think he'll be a great candidate filling that PPG role on the board as well. So I'm hoping that the motion that might be coming from the floor for the interim secretary to cast a unanimous ballot would also include Steve. So the ballot would be for for Steve, for Anna, for Terrence Terry, and then for the renewing directors also, which is Linda and me. Andrea is technically a renewing director too, but she's going to step back entirely. She'll do some kind of coordinated transfer, but she's going to step back. So, Jay, I think, is that motion coming from you?
I'd like to make a motion to unanimously adopt all of those.
I would second that unanimous motion. Short and sweet.
Are there any questions about that motion? I'll mention that the Western New York Environmental Alliance remains a membership organization, which is why we're doing it this way. Those of you who are actual members of the organization, which is really just a statement on your organization's behalf. There's no pay involved. It's just whether or not you want to be called a member or just connected as a supporter or associate. Those of you who are members, you may or may not even know that, but we did try to indicate who was and wasn't are the people who can vote, one per organization. So with that motion, with a second and no discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. One of the most important things we can do is have a good board, so I think that's we're off to a great start. Thank you all for coming. Stretch for a second while I figure out what's going on with the technology here. But don't leave the room unless you have to. If you do have to leave the room, the restrooms, if you don't know, are through the main room to the left, down that way. And we'll reconvene in a couple seconds. Also, Linda's goodies are here too.
I see they covered the lake, mission.
Nick told me he just came from a room of 200 students. He didn't need a microphone, and they all listened the entire time without any diversion of attention, right?
Well, and the thing is when you teach adults, they're just bigger kids, right? So my first bachelor's is in elementary education, and so the tricks that we were taught in LA were classroom management and modeling behavior and doing certain things in certain ways that kids respond really well to. It still works when you're teaching doctoral students. Like, it doesn't matter if they're in third grade or if they're 35, they still like stickers, right? If you still say, stop talking and look at the disruptive student, so do the other 199 students. Jay's going to talk a lot about the 30 by 30 initiative, and we kind of want to give that a little bit of context in a way that how we got here and how we can sort of tie in the 30 by 30 and a bunch of our other initiatives together with the Western New York Environmental Alliance. And so coming out of COVID, one of the big ideas that we had was sort of coming up with a theme, right? And we would have some sort of tangible, measurable objective that rather than us being, do you remember those awful, there were scanners and fax machines and telephones and copy machines and computer printers, and it was all in one, right? Brother, all in one, super duper, and it sucks at everything. It's terrible. It couldn't copy, it would jam, it didn't scan anything, right? There was lines on it. If you got a faxes, but like back then it was not a great fax machine, right? So it did many, many things, and none of them very well at all. And so when thinking about how we can sort of channel and direct our energies, it occurred to us that perhaps having some kind of thematic idea that many of our initiatives would revolve around, a bigger, larger, decade-long pitch of what our interests and where our priorities were. And so it made a lot of sense to say, all right, let's call this the decade of biodiversity. So rather than getting involved in every environmental issue that comes along and thereby basically doing a lot of things and none of them very well, what if we channeled our energies into one kind of overall idea? And over again, at the root of Phil's work, at the root of all of our work in Western New York, it is biodiversity. Right? That is the root of what we have, our natural capital, our ecosystem services, all rely on biodiversity. And that means something different to everyone, right? Buffalo Audubon, it means something totally different than it does to me as a soil scientist. Right? I'm thinking about how bugs and bees live in soils from post-industrial or brownfield areas, and somebody else might be case in point, you know, first of all, what nastiness are you digging up, but also, what is the effect of that sedimentation that's now been disturbed and is now in the water column? What's that effect on phytoplankton? And that subsequent effect on the zooplankton, and then little, you know, your little copepods and conifers and your daphnias, right? Are they all choking to death? Or are they pretty good with it? One of the things I tell the students is that always gets them, because not everybody, about 40% of our students are not from Western New York at all. And one of the kind of putting it into the focus things is so you know those crime shows where they have the mass spectrometer, right? Oh, we'll just put this in the mass spec, it'll be done in 3 seconds because it's television. I can tell you that actually takes about a week to crack one of those samples. So Hollywood is lying to you. I know it's the first time it's hard to hear, but it's not truthful. Anyway, when you set up that machine, calibrate the machine to a known quantity. And so, ICP, OES, and definitely coupled plasmography, all kinds of different spectroscopy, they all have the universal standard to calibrate a mass spectrometer is sediment from the Buffalo River. Worldwide, we are the standard of shadiness. We know what the value is, that's in how much lead, how much arsenic, how much cadmium, right? And so this is our history. But it doesn't have to be our future. How can we, as organizations, at one time the Western New York Environmental Alliance was 135 member organizations, how do we coordinate? How do we play matchmaker? How do we buoy each other up and not say, instead of this is my project, you can't have it. But rather we can all work towards a common goal, and that common goal for the next 10 years is biodiversity. Writ large, however you want to interpret that, and that might be, Black Rock Riverside Alliance doing the National Wildlife Habitat certification. That might be the studies that we're doing in biology and in environmental sustainability. It could be on solitary bees. That might be the stuff that Robert Warner is doing right here with Africanized fire ants. Right? That biodiversity means a ton of different things, but if we can all appreciate the importance of it and all set that as kind of our leading space, I really think that having a long-term thematic set of priorities is where, as really a matchmaking and clearinghouse organization like the Environmental Alliance, is where our energy is best spent. How can we bring you together? How can we support our member organizations in this biodiversity impetus for the next several years? So we started the Decade of Biodiversity, and along with the Western New York Land Conservancy, and they're bringing in just very recently Tony Hiss, and talking about the 30 by 30, and us thinking, hey, this is a really terrific idea. And so to tell you a little bit more about this terrific idea, please welcome Professor Jay Burkey.
My technology here. So I did that in a second. Make sure. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Nick. We definitely can hear Nick.
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nick. I want to thank John. John really did a lot of work to put this event together, and so did Linda and our
Kelly.
Thank you.
Welcome. By the way, as Phil was speaking, what was going around in my mind was, I think it's credited to Thoreau, in wildness is the preservation of the world. I think that's Thoreau. Someone can check that on your sources. truth and knowledge. I think Marcus has got it. But in case that isn't resonating with you perfectly, although I think it should, maybe it's in biodiversity is the preservation. But let me see if I can get Jay's presentation back too. Which way do we move? The easiest way is to.
All right, well, hello. Can you give me this microphone? No. I'll use this microphone.
Yeah.
So, as Nick said, we improved the idea of this decade of biodiversity to kind of focus our energies on the things that he was talking about doing.
Wrong mic.
Wrong mic. I'm dyslexic. I wrote. So we've done a lot of work, and we've had a lot of campaigns. And some of you may be familiar with the Outer Harbor campaign that we put together to defeat certain kinds of development in the Outer Harbor. We went to court a couple of times, a couple of these organizations here today. We haven't won it, but we've slowed it down. If you've been to the Outer Harbor, you notice there aren't condos down there. That's good. Thank you, with your Environmental Alliance, for taking leadership in that.
Yeah.
We've also done the Plants Coalition that came out here, a couple of other projects. So now what we're talking about is this thing called 30 by 30. I don't know how many of you have heard about 30 by 30. Let's see if my dyslexia works here. Find the arrow. Yes. There's a fellow named Edward O. Wilson, I don't know if you've heard of him, he was a Harvard professor, and in 2016 he published a book called Cat Hurt, and the story was, in order for us to survive as a species, not the Earth's going to survive, in order for us to survive as a species, we have to save half the Earth by the year 2050, 50 by 50. We've kind of focused our target a little bit differently in the last couple of years. Tony is a certain component of this, but changing from 50 by 50 to 30 by 30, can we change or conserve or protect half 30% of the Earth? So, what we're doing now is we're talking about creating a campaign. We're not talking about it, we're creating a campaign called 30 by 30 in our region. So, these are regional biodiversity issues that have to do with decade of biodiversity. Think global at global, saving 30% of the Earth by 3030 is a global target. It's also a local target. We're part of a movement to save human beings on this planet, and 30 by 30 is the initiative that we're moving towards. What does it mean? What are you conserving? What are you protecting? Ecologically important land and water, basically. That's a big, broad definition. That's where we start. We want to protect ecologically important land and waters by the year 2030, globally, regionally, and locally. How do we do that? Well, there's a national policy initiative President Biden put together called America Beautiful, and part of that calls it a pragmatic approach that puts people at the center and outlines an inclusive and collaborative vision for local-led efforts to conserve, steward, and restore lands and waters will help us reach our shared goals. So that's an interesting thing. I especially like the inclusive, collaborative part, because that's what we're about. That's what the West American Alliance has always been about. I'm not going to read this to you, but this is what the National Policy Initiative basically point to. I'll let you read it, and I don't have to read it. You don't have to read it. But there's a lot of principles here that we can adopt, we should adopt. It's a national policy. Okay, I'm moving on. That's such an important part of this. We can't do this in isolation. Yeah. Over the years that I've been active in conservation, I've looked around the conservation atmosphere, usually old white men. And now that I'm an old white man, I know my role, but we need to come into the old white men to do this. So we need to work with our communities, and we have Native American communities, we have refugee communities, car communities, whatever communities are, we need to be collaborative. And again, that's what we have done in the Outer Harbor Coalition. And we're starting to pollinate with the plant. So what are ecologically important lands and waters? This is one way to start thinking about it. Shorelines, parks, nature preserves, forests, including urban forests, meadows, streetscapes, neighborhoods, wetlands, lakes, rivers, creeks, and agriculture. You know, these all have their good and bad parts. I'm not, in favor of agriculture in terms of the green conservation space, but it can be better. We can look at that and start thinking about it. How do we make it better? Uh-oh, it stopped. John, I've only got a few more slides.
I was trying to give it a little time.
Something changed.
It's fun.
I don't know, just screen change here. Yep, thank you. Okay, thank you. So there's a lot of ways to look at our counties, and we're talking about this, our region. I mean, Erie County, Madison County, Madison County, Chautauqua County, all of our counties are part of our region. But we have examples of how data is being gathered currently. We can have data in Erie County, the parks and forests are mapped. So we have these kinds of materials, what I'm trying to say here. And again, as we identify sites, evaluate sites, collaborate and advocate for third. We also have some really neat resources, including the Niagara River Greenway. There's a lot of mapping in the Greenway with the water period that shows habitats and different land use patterns. So we have tools we can start to use, and they're all GIS to the Greenway stuff. We have tools. We can really start to figure out how to do this. City of Buffalo, has its own nuances, and these are just some different looks at green spaces, generically characterized. This is an important part here too. Priority neighborhoods. This is from Olmsted, and they determine how do we prioritize where we do our stuff, our development, our parks, our green spaces. So that's an important part of what we need to be working with also. And we have integrated partners here that are going to help us do that. Now, we as a coalition did a lot of work in the Outer Harbor. And we had this, our Harbor Coalition in the Save the Bellsouth Preserve. We're not doing so well with the Bellsouth Preserve, but we're doing pretty well in keeping it green. But its future is development. I know that if you're down here today, did a week ago, a month ago, or a year ago, they're developing. And the target from Governor Hochul is development. Her friends are developers. And, so we have a lot of work to do down here still, but we've been working with it. One of the things that came up recently is how you decide what kinds of spaces to conserve. And Margaret is an advocate and a fighter for this, which is called the Local Waterfront Revitalization Program. That takes the waters off the Buffalo out to almost to the boundary, up to the international boundary, and suggests that those are the waters that we need to conserve. We can look at all the waters out to the international boundary, and they're part of Erie County, Marion County, whatever waterfront communities. Those are areas that we need to target and say, look, we're doing that, or we need to do that. So we have a lot of things. We can probably get to the 30% if we work hard at it. We probably have about 25% now that we can identify both in the city and in the county. How do we get the rest of that? This is one way to suddenly jump ahead of the game. Right? We need to conserve our waterways. It's part of our biodiversity. This is some talking points about what we do in the Outer Harbor. These pictures are some of the things we work to conserve out there. Beautiful habitat, not condos yet. Part of our campaign was, what do you want in the Outer Harbor? You want what's at the top picture, which is what even without the condos, how the development corporation wants to see, you want to see a lot of activity, like the air shows, the carnivals, the festivals. Do you want that, or do you want more green space? Well, part of our advocacy for 30 by 30 might be looking at places like that, and saying, this is a priority site to preserve, and that might make a decision, or difference in your decision making if you're an elected official or an agency official. It's important to know we are so connected to the planet. The bottom right shows Planet Greenway in an international way as something we talk about as creating resiliency zones. And I know Phil talked about a lot about resilience and weather resiliency. And I think you did really well to say it's not just about habitat and environment, it's about social consequences, it's about economic consequences. So in the old days, we used to talk about resiliency, we call it sustainability. It's the intersection between society, economics, and nature being the bottom line. So what is a resilient zone? One of the ways to think about it is social, economic, and environmental consequences, and how it works better all of our lives to managing, recognizing those relationships. So we need to work with a lot of different organizations, governments, neighborhoods, individuals, and all of you, and tribal groups, and we have relationships with all of those things. And we're going to build into a campaign, and we even have model ordinances for the state of New York. I want to say that not only do we have a national policy for 30, we have a state policy for 30 by 32, and so that falls right down on us, that we can use that state policy to develop local ordinances. We're handing out, if you don't have one, please grab one. And I wanted to say at the very end that we have decided we're going to hold a summit meeting of sorts. We're going to gather all of these groups together, as many as we can, at the Museum of Science on Saturday, November 11th. We're going to talk about this. We're going to figure out how we can go ahead and do it. It's not a big deal. We come up with an ordinance, we get local governments and regional governments to pass it. I think that's easier than the next level of work, which is how do we continue to preserve and protect those places. So that's the future of that too. That's it.
I thought maybe Nick and Jay and I will hang out up here, and for the 15 minutes or so that we have left, try to encourage some dialogue about what you and your organizations are doing with respect to biodiversity, land protection, environmental issues of concern, from your own organization's perspective, and also any questions that you may have of the group as we look toward the coming year as an alliance, which is our goal. So we'll just kind of be here. I probably don't need a mic, but we'll use them if we need to. Linda, you have any questions?
Well, it's less of a question and more, I just wanted to give a shout out to Tony Piss's book, Rescue the Planet. If you haven't seen it, it's really excellent, not only from a historical perspective, but it's filled with places where we are already saving the earth and the different kinds of range of strategies that we have in order to be able to do that. It's very, very interesting, and I really encourage you to get a hold of it if you haven't seen it.
So, yeah, that's a great recommendation. Sitting on my coffee table now, my wife is finishing it and I turn. Yes. Although I did go to a couple of his presentations, which were great. Thanks to the Western Area Land Minister for that program. Yes. I'll bring the mic. It's okay.
I have a very specific question.
It's okay.
I hope so I'd ask.
Put it right next to your mouth.
Put your, in the mouth. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know. We're still open sensitive also.
I have a very specific question. I've been in England for several weeks and I came back in May, early May, and one of the things I did when I returned was to walk the outer harbour on the bicycle path. And I was horrified when I entered it to see pesticide signs up on the grass verge between the bike path and the lake, and the vegetation had died, it's turned yellow and was flattened. It's come back. But I just wondered, who's in charge of looking after that space, and why would they be putting down pesticides in a place that's supposed to preserve biodiversity?
Nick, take it for a second.
No.
Yeah, because we don't have great answers for that.
No, because I'll take them in the needs as much as you do. Where? Yeah.
I can tell you, this is a new development, and not everybody on the board has heard this either. We've been asking for quite a while to meet with the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, and we have finally heard back to meet with their president. And that will probably happen the week of the 23rd of October, and it may involve Jay, and it may involve Linda, it may involve Margaret. Probably not too many more than that, just because we don't want to overwhelm the new president, but we will share concerns similar to that.
I share that concern.
And we're not afraid to figure out what it says. Nick may be ready.
One of this year was particularly heartbreaking for the outer harbor for me, because for the last, how many years have we done the monarch thing there? No, me, well, yeah, more than, a lot. So, I take my ecological methods class, which ranges between 75 and 100 students a semester, out to the outer harbor, and we tag monarch butterflies as they migrate from Canada down to Mexico, and it's a pretty spot there because of the green web. The monarch looks at Ontario, says we had a supermarket flag. Here, same thing, but just kind of skirt along the shoreline, I can make it. And so much of this is the same as birds in Niagara, such a here, is because any migratory species are being kind of funneled into that greenway, right? Last September, my students had 275 migrating monarch butterflies. And this summer, we couldn't get in because of construction. Wow. And so that kick to biodiversity, that one small thing, and that's the one species, right? But the fact that it's the phenomenon of monarch migration is an IUCN threatened phenomenon. And it's recognized as something that will go extinct. Our grandkids won't know the migratory routes of eastern and western populations of monarchs. Who's accountable for that? Who do you, right? How do you deal with that? And I think so often of that one line in St. Kind of Almanac where Leopold says the problem with ecological education is one who lives in a world of wounds. And that one, seeing all those excavators and bulldozers there was definitely a wound this summer.
So let me just back it up a little bit. It's worse than the fact that you just couldn't get in this year. At the end of last year's session, literally 2 days after we stopped tagging, your class stopped tagging on the issues were
on the news side. Yeah.
They bulldozed it, the whole meadow we were working. And so let me just answer your question of wounds. It's a complicated question here, but there's some big targets. City of Buffalo owns some sites, Tifft Nature Preserve, which is managed by Erie County. And then State Park has a huge area, including the boat harbor and part of the park. The biggest target that we've been dealing with is the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, which is a state agency, the developer corporation. And part of our campaign is that we need to transfer the ownership away from them because they're developers. We've talked about state parks, we've talked about other things, there's a lot of other ideas that are coming up. Erie Canal Harbor Development appropriated a lot of money. They just got $11 million to develop next to the beach at Wilkerson Point for the pretty new part of the Blue Lights, the stages loop. They are bad actors, and we need to get rid of them. They're landscaping contractor, they don't know anything about anything. They say we know native plants, we put them in, they don't grow. And the DCHG says, nobody will have no grow native plants, so they're not being contracted. And they use pesticides. So we're in the DCHG state. Canton Mobile is their boss. So that's what we're doing. And I'm glad that you said we're meeting with them. The governor's point person was here, just reached out last week and said, let's do this meeting. So that's good. Thank you, by the way, for bringing up activism and all that stuff.
But Jane, I mean, I just, in answer to my friend here, also, you know, we did sue first a private developer and then PCHGC over the development in the Outer Harbor. And we did look at their secret, their state environmental quality review application to have permits to do all this stuff, including use pesticides. And we said, this is not consistent with the idea of protecting the wildlife or natural life on the Outer Harbor. And we lost both lawsuits. We lost the appeals. And
we didn't lose on the merits. They never listened to the merits. Well, it was procedural.
Yes, but we also, talked to the common council. We were very active trying to talk to the local and county people in charge of this, because they would know these particular spots. And so I guess what I'm saying is that we can say it's a DCHC and they stink, and I hate what they're doing. But I also think that, we can't win in court. And yet, there's such a clear case that everything they're doing is so destructive, and yet they're meeting the environmental quality review. They're getting the permits for the environmental quality review. So, the whole system is geared towards development, not just DCHC. And so, I don't know, we're just going to have to all be out there in court all the time, to make a difference.
Nick, if you want to press the mic that way. No. You want to pass the mic that way.
Just with regard to pesticides, I know that Sierra Club has been supporting state law, the Birds and Bees Act, which I believe the Assembly and the Senate will pass. But Governor Hochul has not yet signed it. She has not yet signed it. And it's to get rid of neonics, which kill insects, especially bees. It's having a big impact on bee populations and therefore on agriculture, especially like fruit farms. That, that requires pollination. So, I mean, at the state level, there is some regulation right now that could be signed by Hochul. It hasn't been yet. That can go into law. It might help some of that usage, but I don't know if it's going to cover every single, insecticide.
Well, it's actually both, but it's a piece.
It's a piece.
It gets signed.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. No more time is left in our agenda for the day. I'm going to try to encourage us to go around the room, starting over here where everybody's pointing. If you can tell us what your organization's up to, and a little bit about what collaboration opportunities may come about.
So I wanted to mention, I failed to mention earlier, that Grassroots Gardens is a certified land trust, and that we are using our land trust certification as a way to protect the green spaces in our network. Of course, there's challenges with securing funding for that. We had originally had applied to the American Rescue Plan funds, and those are are still getting figured out. I think our work will move towards that 30 by 30 goal. We're dealing with much smaller properties in an urban setting, but I feel like our work combined with the work with Western Land Conservancy at the landscape scale, and then even the work with Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust, and the work we've done along the Greenway will be a big part of that 30 by 30 within Western New York. So, definitely keep an eye out with grassroots gardens as we expand our land trusts and grow and develop in that way. And then I'm also trying to beef up our volunteer program and focus a lot of our programming on getting people involved in these urban areas with pollinator conservation and working specifically with native plants and those benefits that are connected. So definitely advocating for native plants in our gardens and always use extra hands. So if you're interested in volunteering specifically with grassroots, then never please let them know.
Excellent. And I
never felt so close to you.
So he never felt so close to you. Yeah, that's what I said. Island ecology is another piece of what we can all be thinking about too, but making the connections is important, as you described. Sarah, we are on a bit of a timeline too, so move as quickly as you're comfortable doing that.
Sure, yeah. I would say that the Massachusetts Avenue Project is doing a couple of different things right now.
No, it was.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So in addition to just teaching regenerative agriculture and the impact that that has on pollinators and the lack of pesticides, we're also focused on planting cultural crops. We're doing a seed saving mentorship as well with our nonprofit extension, and doing some trials, which is kind of exciting, especially as we engage the youth in educating them around things like nematode application on the soil and things like that. As far as advocacy work goes, the Birds and Bees Act is something we've been educating on and pushing a lot on social media platforms and just trying to get people informed about genetics. And then we've also been doing a bit more growing and selling native plants. We're working with a partner who's growing a number of native plants in our greenhouse that will be selling to the public next year. And yeah, I guess our partnerships are pretty important with us.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, like discussing, I'll just mention that it's our thought that when we break up here, we may reconvene someplace less formal, it's not highly formal, whether that's Charlie Boatner or Nick, what was your suggestion?
Gene McCarthy.
Sounds like it might be Gene McCarthy's. In fact, it's almost certainly Gene McCarthy's at this point. So be thinking about that too. We can have other conversations with refreshments.
And if you haven't been, have a lovely outdoor patio space that's nice and fresh.
Well, I think that there can be a role for legal voters and advocating for the Birds and Bees Act for one thing, for sure, and the 30 by 30 initiatives, however they take legislative form to do. That's one thing that we can do really well. And other than that, right now, I look forward to seeing our waterfront committee, re-energized.
I like to just keep it high level. Buffalo Homes and Conservancy this year has a team called the Invasive Species Eradication Team, so it's kind of open to the public. It has the education element of talking about the species, removing of them. It's, again, kind of trying to get park users to park and kind of just putting cuts down before like identifying it, what do you see that's invasive in your park sort of thing. It's 17 seconds, so I'm going to look up for it.
of awareness and education as our role as park stewards and maintainers to find out how do we find a balance between maintaining the parks for public passive active use and also supporting the ecosystem. So, for example, managed meadow areas, which is like normal areas, but to the public, if they do not have the education on the background to know like it's intentionally promote for a good benefit, then they would be wired on maintaining the parks. So finding the balance.
The Interfaith Plant Justice Committee, we did a project getting faith communities to plant trees, native trees. It wasn't hugely successful. We figured we were better off doing educational opportunities, and last year we had a huge Earth Day festival. We had 7 speakers, some other organizations in this room, Margaret was one of our speakers. So I would say education is the biggest role.
I think with Sierra Club, because we do have a statewide chapter, our biggest push has been on legislation that would either, protect wetlands, expand wetlands. We mentioned already the Birds and Bees Act, things of that nature. And I think also our primary focus really is doing things that will help us move into a clean energy future, because we all know that climate change, this climate crisis really is a diversity killer. I mean, it's allowing invasive species to take over, it's killing off sensitive species, etc. So we're doing a lot of different things to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings and transportation.
Yeah, so I'm with the Biological Society, which mainly began as more an academic study versus we collect data about birds, which is obviously useful to see what trends are going on. But the Conservation Committee, which I'm part of, is more active, but supporting things to protect habitat. So when there's something going on, like with this stamp proposal for that industrial area, we will, write letters of support and use our organization and membership, make statements and support those things. So I wouldn't say we're environmentally active in the whole, that's our conservation part. And so when things are going on, it's nice when we can know about it, when people let us know, and so that we can, actively support it, or financially support the projects that are protecting habitat.
Good question. Plant Conservancy, I'm excited that the project that I'm overseeing, wildlife, fits perfectly into our 30 by 30, and that we are creating a wildlife corridor for protected and restored habitat all the way from the Pennsylvania border until Lake Ontario. So very excited to figure out how we can work with all of you to help us achieve such an ambitious mission.
Well, I represent the Area Conservation Committee today, and the club itself has kind of drifted away from environmental concerns, but I have been involved with the Area Club over acid rain back in the 80s, and I still think that any organization that is oriented towards nature and that has a responsibility to conduct environmental disciplines and encourage it by their membership. But I also read now, I just read William Shear's History of World War II, and in it he admires the spirit again as they rebuilt Europe, and he compares it to the enhancement of human dignity by the construction of Chartres Cathedral, of the Requiem, and other great human achievements. And I'm thinking lately that we have this environmental challenge of climate change staring us in the face, but it seems to me that we can add human dignity like any other to encourage people just to live within their means, to shut off the lights when you leave, the old-fashioned stuff, drive your car at a speed limit, do things like that, and encourage people to do that. That's our responsibility as any group going into the environment to bring responsible stewardship to our world. That we can do it by small lessons and local lessons.
Native Collaborative, of course, is very, very interested in the biodiversity, particularly the part that is regional. Here, they're working really hard. There's a huge increase in the number of nurseries that have native plants available. That information is available online. But we're still not at a point where we can actually take care of a restoration project. We don't have that many kind of plants. So hopefully that will be becoming something that we will be able to do in the near future. Also, just wanted to mention that, speaking of some of the other aspects of the climate change, that tomorrow there will be a rally at the South Park across from the water pump station. We'll be pushing Governor Hochul to pass the Climate Change Superfund Act, which will require the gas and oil companies to put up at least $3 billion a year to help defray the cost. Last year, in New York State, actually, taxpayers paid over $2 billion to take care of the climate disasters that are happening. We feel really strongly that the people who caused the problem should pay for it. Trainers, small buildings, and the South Park.
We have a lot going on. Our individual organization, the Western Environmental Alliance does. Please let us know how we can better support your missions also. It's not just about you supporting us. We want to know what works for you and why we become valuable in the future. So don't hesitate to be in contact with us. Thank you for being here today. Congratulations from the board members and coming here. Thank you.
As Jay said, we're grateful and appreciative of the new board members coming on, board members who've been around for a while, renewing, and those of you who will be up for election next year. We've got a lot of work to do this coming year. So again, thank you for coming out this afternoon. Where are we headed next?
Gene McCarthy's, the old First Ward.
Gene McCarthy's in the old First Ward will be our next stop.